see so many of you here. So today we're going to talk about how to turn awareness into action and how to make a real difference in accessibility. So my name is Mathilde Buenerd. I'm a front-end developer at Shopify and also a certified web accessibility specialist. And I'm living here in Madrid. Another thing I like to do is hiking. You can see me doing this here in the surrounding of Madrid. And so the first question is, why am I making this talk? So I have been a front-end developer for years, and I've been interested in accessibility since the beginning. And I realized that it took me a lot of time to go from having a basic awareness of what accessibility problems are and to go to kind of a next level and find a way to be very impactful in overcoming accessibility issues. So in this talk, I'll be sharing the strategies that I have found helpful to make a real impact and create a meaningful change. So this talk is not about like tips and tricks to improve accessibility, but more about how to build strong foundation that will allow you to handle accessibility projects at a higher scale. So a little overview of today's session. I'll start with a little introduction of what's the current state of accessibility. And after that, we'll go to 4 strategies that I found effective to actually make a difference. First, how to do manual testing. We're going to do a screen reader testing demo, so be ready for that. Then we're going to talk about how to effectively prioritize a backlog of accessibility issues. Then we talk about how to learn to leverage WCAG. If you don't know what it is yet, you'll learn later. And finally, we talk about how to involve people with disabilities in the process. So what's the current state of accessibility? In 2003, according to an empirical study from WebAIM that was conducted above more than 1 million web pages, they concluded that 96.3% of all pages they tested had accessibility issues. So the thing that this data point shows is that accessibility is a big problem. If you are having a website or if you are developing a website, well, it's very likely that your website has accessibility issues too. Another point I'd like to mention is about law and policies. This is a map that shows countries that have governmental policies related to accessibility in 2003. Forgive me if this list is not exhaustive. It's information taken from the W3C, Web Accessibility Initiative's website. And what we can see here is basically all of European Union, the United States, Canada, Argentina, India, China, Australia, New Zealand. So this map is quite generic, right? Like, of course, each policy is different in each country. But what this means is that if you are if your business operates in any of these countries, or if you are working with businesses in any of these countries, well, it's likely that you have to be accessible by law, or that you might be taking a legal risk by not doing so. So let's jump into the core of the presentation and talk about how to perform manual testing, which is the first thing I encourage you to develop to go to the next level. So performing accessibility testing is a crucial part of the process because it's what allows you to actually build empathy with users and also to understand better what are the barriers that people can face. It's also useful if you need to reproduce any errors that are reported by your users. So out of curiosity, who here has already performed accessibility testing or does perform accessibility testing in their company? That's quite a bit of people. That's cool. So we can differentiate between 2 types of accessibility testing, one that's automated and one that's manual. On the automated tested side, we have everything that doesn't require human interaction, things like browser extension or browser tools like Lighthouse, accessibility insights, web accessibility evaluation tools, AxDev tools. You have also testing libraries that you can directly use in your software development project, like Axcore, Axcore React. You have equivalent for Vue.js and other frameworks. And finally, you also have linters. So you might already know some of these tools, and if you don't, well, I encourage you to check it out. Automated tools are a huge help in accessibility testing, but the thing is that they cannot catch every error. Actually, it's estimated that only 30% of accessibility issues can be found using those techniques. So they're very prone to false positive and false negative. So you might you need to have some kind of extra knowledge to interpret the result that they give you. So I don't say you shouldn't use them. I just say that if you want to get reliable results, you need to do manual testing on top of automated testing. Okay, so that's why today we're going to focus on manual testing. So there are many ways to do manual testing, probably as many ways as there are different type of disabilities and different type of assistive technologies. Somebody who's blind doesn't use the web the same way as somebody who has a motor disability. So doing manual testing can mean many things. It could be testing using a screen reader, using string magnifiers, using voice recognition. Today we're going to focus on screen reader testing. Screen reader testing is something good to learn because it allows you to, it has some kind of good return on investment because it allows you to test a wide range of functionality, including keyboard navigation, invalid markup, and ARIA implementation, if you're familiar with it. Don't know what's happening here. So when we say screen readers, what we actually mean is screen readers with an S, right? Because you can think of screen readers like web browsers. They're more or less similar, but they can have like differences. They have different features. They have a different interface, basically. And users choose which screen reader to use based on their preferences, so the operating system or the cost of them. So here are 4 commonly used screen readers. It's not exhaustive as well. In the Windows world, we have JAWS, which is widely used in the professional world. We have also NVDA, which is free and open source, and which is on the rise. And on over popular one includes VoiceOver, which is the built-in Apple built-in screen reader that you can find on macOS and iOS, and TalkBack, which is Google's built-in screen reader that you find on Android devices. So today we're going to do a demo using VoiceOver on macOS. The core features of all screen readers are pretty similar, so this demo will still be useful even if you're using other platforms. So the last thing before I start, when you do screen reader testing, one thing that I advise you to do is to have some kind of cheat sheet with keyboard shortcuts, because if you're sighted, you can just find this online and print it. Screen readers are mostly non-visual tools, meaning that once you start working with them, well, you don't have a menu that can help you to navigate and to find the functionality. So if you're using VoiceOver, the one I advise you to know is what's called the VO key, or the VoiceOver modifier. It's basically the keys that you have to press to execute any other shortcut. So if, for example, you want to go to the next element, which is here 4th on the list, the shortcut is VO plus arrow left, meaning Control plus Option plus arrow left. The VO key can be modified, but this is the default value. Other commands very useful is turning VoiceOver on with Command plus F5, stop reading, which is Control, go to the next and previous element, VO plus arrow left or plus arrow right, read contents, VO plus A, and open the rotor, VO plus U. If you don't know what the rotor is, well, we're going to see that right away, so don't worry. So it's time to do the demo, so let me just change the screen display. Okay. Okay, can you see? Yep, perfect. So I'm going to turn VoiceOver on to test this like little website. So it's a very simple page that I generated using ChatGPT. Don't be mad at this, please. It's basically a little paragraph, that shows some information about Madrid, some like little pictures. You have here a little switch that you can use to change the color mode of the page. And here you have a little email that, I don't know, you can write your email into it and press subscribe, and it sends you nice emails with nice tips. So I'm going to turn VoiceOver on. It's going to make some noise.
VoiceOver on Safari. Welcome to Madrid window. Welcome to Madrid has keyboard focus. You are currently on a banner inside web content.
Cool. So a couple of things that you can see here, right? If we talk in terms of user interface, we see 2 things here. The first is this kind of like black and white outline around the element, and this is something that's around what's called the voiceover cursor. So it's the element that's currently focused by voiceover. And here on the bottom left, you have a little text box that's basically writing what voiceover says out loud. So I'm going to start using Control Option A, and it's just going to read the content of the page.
Banner. Welcome to Madrid. Color mode. Introduction. Madrid is a vibrant and exciting city with plenty to see and do. Whether you're visiting for the first time or planning to live here, it's important to know some basics to make your stay more enjoyable. Food and...
Okay, cool. So I just press Control to post this. So this seems to work pretty well, right? Like the content was said the way we're expecting. So what I'm going to try to do now is to navigate element from element using Control Option and left arrow. Maybe I'm going to try to change the color mode of this page. So I'm pressing Control Option, left arrow.
Madrid is a vibrant introduction, main, end of banner, color mode. Welcome to Madrid, color mode, end of banner.
Okay, so I don't know if you saw what happened here, but I was trying to get on this like color mode element because I would like to activate it, but actually I cannot. And this is because this element is not marked properly. So it's probably just some kind of div. So it means like as somebody who is just clicking on the button, it works, but as somebody who would be using a screen reader, it's not available. You might be thinking maybe somebody who uses a screen reader has no interest in changing the color mode, but actually they could. Not all screen reader users are blind, some are sighted, so they might want to access this functionality. So let's just go a bit after in the page. So I'd like to see a bit like what's happening on this page, and I can see that I have a shortcut that just reads me the whole page, but it's not so convenient, right? Like it would be nice if I can have some kind of overview of what this page contains, and VoiceOver has a very nice tool for that, which is called the rotor. So I'm going to open it, use it, Control Option U.
Links menu.
Okay, so the rotor is basically some kind of menu that allows you to navigate the page using different kind of semantic elements. So here we have one for links. I'm going to use right arrow to go through all the different menus that exist.
Headings menu. Form controls menu. Landmarks menu. Window spots menu. Links menu.
Okay, so those different menus can be configured. You can remove the headings if you want. You can add some other ones as well. So a couple of things we can notice here is that here we have this links menu that has those two recipe elements. I'm going to focus them.
Recipe, link.
So we can see that those like recipe links in context, they make sense, right? It's like, oh, some popular dishes include tortilla de patatas recipe and fried squid ring sandwich recipe. But when you look at it from the links menu, well, they all look the same, so they're not really helpful. So that's one thing that's not working super properly. I'm going to try to go to another way of navigating.
Headings menu.
Headings. So headings is actually shown to be one of the most common way that screen readers use to navigate the page. Here you can see a number before each of the heading, and it corresponds to what's the heading level, right? 1 means H1, 2 means H2, etc. So I'm going to navigate with that, and I'm going to go directly maybe to the subscribe section.
Welcome to Madrid. Introduction, food and basic thing. Subscribe to receive more tips.
Okay, so I just press enter to go to there, and here I see that. Sorry, I need to drink. I think. Yeah, I see that I have this like email field that I can fill to receive some more tips. So let me do that. So the email field is an interactive element. So to navigate there, I can use the tab key.
Recipe, email. You are currently on it.
So what you notice here is that I used the tab key, but I didn't use the tab before, right? Like, so the VoiceOver cursor that was on the subscribe to receive money is different from the keyboard focus, actually. That's why when I press focus, it didn't start from the subscribe to receive more tips heading, but it started from the top of the page. And because there were some other interactive elements before, like the links, it went up there. So I'm going to type an address into this field. Each time I'm going to type something, it's going to set it out loud, so don't be surprised.
ATH-MATH-L-G-O-M
Okay.
gmail.com.
That's it.
You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type.
So I'm going to press enter and subscribe.
math@gmail.com.
Cool, so here we can see two things. First, so it said what is the input that I typed before it was removed. And second thing, we see that this successfully subscribed message appeared, but actually we didn't hear it, right? And so if you imagine that we are not sighted and we don't see what's happening, well, that message would have not been conveyed to us. And we have really no way to know if this has worked or not. So what we can do is just try to go to next element to see, okay, what happened here.
Subscribe. Successfully subscribed.
Okay, and here we know that this message appeared, but ideally it would be nice if this message was announced before. So I'm going to turn voiceover off now. This is it for
Voiceover off.
Oops, this is it for the demo. So let me share the screen again. Oop. Oop. Okay. Sorry, just trying to get back to Chrome. Oop. Okay, let me press play. Okay. Oosh. Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem with the direct, but it's okay. We're almost there. Up. Okay, just need to exit the full screen and bring this for me. Don't laugh, huh? Please be kind. No. Okay, awesome. Here we are. So now we're done with the demo. So let's go back to our strategies and talk about how to prioritize effectively an accessibility backlog. So during the testing, we found 3 issues. The first one was this color switch not being keyboard accessible. The second was this ambiguous link from the links menu, this like to recipe thing. And then there was this form submit message, like successfully submitted, that was not conveyed. So before addressing it, we have to prioritize them, right? Like when you have bugs in your apps, for example, you will never start to address non-critical bugs and let the critical one unaddressed, right? So this is basically the same for accessibility issues. So I'm gonna ask another question here. Who in this room feels like, I said 90% confident about what's the item here that has the highest priority? Have like 3 people, 4 people maybe. So, I mean, let's be honest, for most developers, it's a question that's difficult to answer. And here we have 3 issues. Imagine if you have like 10 of them, right? So, and the thing is, we won't make a difference if we first tackle the issues which are not important and we let the ones which are critical. So I haven't answered any question here, right? Like, how do we prioritize? Well, wouldn't it be nice if we had some kind of framework that would classify accessibility issues by order of level of importance? Well, I have good news for you here, and you already know. Yes, that exists. People already did the work of classifying that for us in order of priority. So that's why we come to the first strategy, which is about learning to work with accessibility standard, and especially here working with the WCAG guidelines. So there's different type of accessibility standard, and I'm not going to go over all of them today. We're going to focus on WCAG because it's one of the most interesting one. And WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guideline, is the most widely used and recognized web accessibility standard nowadays. It comes from the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, and it's basically a set of guidelines that describe how to make the web accessible for people with a wide range of disability. Another interesting thing about this is that this exists almost since the World Wide Web exists. This was really something that was part of the World Wide Web project, and it's not something that just got added afterwards. So if you already know about WCAG, well, that's great. If you don't, I strongly encourage you to have a look at this. Actually, before, when I talked about the study that said like, okay, 96.3% of home pages had detected accessibility issues in 2003. Well, what the study really meant was they had WCAG 2 accessibility failures. So meaning they were not complying with this standard. So the WCAG guidelines are accessible online. Here you can see a screenshot of the above the fold content of what's called the quick reference. for WCAG. So you can probably not read it. I mean, it's not the goal. You can see that it's quite complex. It's very detailed. That's the thing. And what this document contains is 78 success criteria, where a success criterion is requirements that must be met to ensure accessibility. So you imagine we won't have the time to go over all of this today, but I'd like to show you an example so you get a glimpse of how to leverage this resource. So each criterion looks more or less like this. So what do we see here? First, we have a name here, status message. And under it, there's a short description. Here it says, in content implemented using markup languages, status messages can be programmatically determined through role or properties such that they can be presented to the user by assistive technology without receiving focus. Let me just drink 1 second. So I agree this is a bit verbose, or this is a bit cryptic, but basically what this means is it's talking about this issue that we saw earlier with the successfully submitted message not showing. What this criteria is saying is that when you have a status message like this, they should be announced by assistive technology without needing for the user to focus on it. So according to this criterion, the message that we saw earlier should have been announced out loud. The second thing that we can see is the level. So there's 3 levels, the A, which is a basic level, the double A, which is a higher level, and triple A, which is the highest level. A level is basically the things that you really have to put right. Like, it's the basic of the basics. You need to have this for sure. AA is a higher level of compliance, but it's still something that you should fix. And AAA is the highest level. It's something that might not apply to 100% of use cases. Maybe sometimes you can fix this, but sometimes it's maybe just not relevant to your content. And this is fine. Another thing we see here is a description. So this is a button. This goes to another page. But the description is a more detailed explanation of what does the criterion actually means, and more specifically, why is it there? So for example, here, if you look at the understanding page for this criterion, they're going to explain you how Screen Reader works and why it's required to announce status messages to give them an experience that's similar to somebody that's not using assistive technology. Another thing we see for almost all success criteria is what's called techniques. So it's basically example of good code or example of code that's compliant with this criterion. And you have also sometimes failures, which is example of bad codes. So techniques are very interesting because they make the link with other standards, and there are also other standards like ARIA, for example. And also, if you're a developer, they will give you some code snippets that you can leverage and adapt for your code. For example, here, in the case of this criteria, we can see that there's a couple of techniques. So there's this one, which is written in situation A, that say, if a status message advises on the success or result of an action or the state of an application. So this is the use case that we had. And we can see that there's a technique here, which is use role status to present status messages. So the role status implementation is something that's part of the ARIA specification. So going back to the 3 issues that we found before, what we should do now is to order the priority according to what's the level of the success criterion that's being broken. So here we have one. Right, status message, level AA. What about the others? Well, I'm going to fill that for you because we don't have all the time. But the color switch not being keyboard accessible breaks the keyboard criterion, which is a huge one, and that states that every functionality that's available using a pointer device should also be accessible using keyboard, and it's an A-level criterion. And then the ambiguous link from the links menu, it breaks the link purpose, link only criterion, which states that the content of the link should describe its purpose just by using the link content and without taking into account the context. And it's an AAA level. So, yeah, we can order that now. And we know which one to fix first. So I know this might look like a tedious process, and it might look like, okay, how do you get to know all those different criteria if there's like almost 80 of them? Well, the truth is that it's a big task, but it's actually something that required if you really want to have a look at larger apps and prioritize a lot of accessibility issues, you need to go through that process. And another reason why you want to do this exercise is because you might have to do this in order to be compliant with the law. We talked earlier about some countries that were implementing governmental policies related to web accessibility, and actually most of these policies are based on WCAG level AA, meaning that when they say a website has to be accessible, what they actually write is that a website has to adhere to all WCAG A and WCAG AA criteria. So last chapter to this presentation, we're almost done. I'd like to talk about how to involve people with disabilities in the process. And one thing to remember is that if you don't have a disability, well, you can download a screen reader and you can use it to test your website, but of course, you don't have the same experience as somebody who's actually facing barriers, and there's limitation to that. So the first thing, the experience is limited because, as we say, if there's an element that you cannot access, but you're actually seeing it, you might just not notice that somebody that who's blind, for example, would have not been aware of it at all. And the other thing is that a lot of screen reader users have an intermediate to advanced proficiency using the screen reader, when if you're not using this on a daily basis, you have only a basic proficiency, meaning that you might not be as efficient as testing, and you might see issues that actually don't exist. People would just try to solve the problem in a different way. So that's where involving people with disabilities help. And in order to do that, I personally recommend this tool that's called Fable. I'm not paid to say that. This is like a genuine recommendation. Something that we use at Shopify. Other company uses it, and it's a service that connects you with people with disabilities in order for you to improve your design and development process. So it's a great way to involve the people that we do this for. And Fable have different type of services, including unmoderated sessions, where basically you give like a test to do to somebody. You can choose what screen reader they will use, for example, and they will try to execute the task and give you a report about whether they succeeded or not, and if they're not, they're going to explain you why. And they also have moderated sessions, which personally I've only did moderated sessions, where you enter a video call with somebody who's using assistive technology, and you can ask them questions, do some kind of user interview, ask them questions like, I don't know, how would you expect to interact with a tab widget, for example? Or you can also do some kind of prototype review. So you do a bunch of tests, you put that online, you give it to them, and you're like, okay, can you try to interact with this piece of content and tell me, if it works for you? And you can see them interacting with it. And it's not random people that this company would put you in contact to, but it's people who have a disability, who have a good proficiency using their screen reader, and also people who know about the web and who know about the implementation details usually, and they will be able to guide you into, okay, this is what's missing here. So I found this to be a great way to get reliable feedback and very quickly. Also to get it at any step in the development process. And also a side effect of using this type of service is that you're just going to learn to be better at doing screen reader testing, because you're going to get some tips from people who use that on a daily basis, which you might not have available in your company or in your surrounding, the people who are surrounding you. So that's it, conclusion time. Just come back to the original question, right? Like how to make a difference. Well, the 4 things I'm not done. The 4 things I advise you to do is first to do manual testing, learn to do manual testing, and try to make that up the development process. Do prioritize the backlog. Resist the temptation to tackle the things that are just coming right now, and just try to give a genuine priority to things and to tackle what's really a bigger problem. learn to work with WCAG. You can learn all over standards. You can learn ARIA. You can learn other type of standards, but WCAG is really the basis that you should look at first if you're starting. And fourth thing, try to involve people with disabilities. It's just gonna help you to actually ensure that everything works. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you learned something today and that we'll be able to leverage this knowledge. Feel free to connect if you want to chat about your project, if you want to, I don't know, go hiking around Madrid, let me know. And that's it. Do you have any questions? I see a question there. I'm going to take advantage of that to drink because I had already 2 fails because I didn't drink.
Hi, thank you. It was really interesting. I just wondered, like you were talking about physical disabilities, how do you work with like intellectual or mental disabilities? Like, do you adapt something?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as part of the WCAG guidelines, I think maybe like a third of all the guidelines are related to cognitive disabilities and so there's different guidelines about that. I think it's something that, I'm not sure how you would test that, but you have some effective ways to try to make that better. For example, you have guidelines about what's the level of complexity of a text. It's something that might sound like, why would you implement that? But if you imagine a website, like, I don't know, a website where you have to, I don't know, pay your taxes, for example, where you need to have everybody who goes there who's understanding what's going on. So you have guidelines like that. Other guidelines include everything related to like trying to not have an environment that has a lot of simulation, so having options to like disable notifications and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I would have a look at. Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I really like it. So in a world with roadmaps with a lot of competing priorities, do you have any tips in how to convince the leadership to allocate some extra time to improve the accessibility?
Yeah, that's the question, right? That's the tricky one, the most tricky one. I think that, one thing is that right now there's really some businesses that are being put at a real risk by not entering accessibility. Like if you look in the US, for example, right now a lot of associations of people with disabilities are actually getting together to sue websites which are not complying by the law. And then judges are forcing those companies to make their website accessible. So, if your company is willing to take that risk, then, why not? But the investment that's not done now might be something that will be bad in the future. So I think right now that's the best incentive that I would use to try to convince a product manager or leadership to tackle this. I think like the empathy card is not working so well, but if you start to look at, this is gonna cost you money, this is something that's gonna cost you time, this is something that's gonna give a bad image of your company, well, this might be a bit more convincing.
Yeah, regarding this topic, there is something that some people say that accessibility is something that is key for some, but is useful for everybody. So this is also a reason to convince management. It's something that will increase the usability of your app for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And another thing that I wanted to ask or I thought is that maybe regarding the priorities that you have shown, maybe there can be something also related to the business logic. For example, if you have a list of 100 links and all the links have the text click here, for example, and you say click here, maybe it's difficult to reach it. And even though it's something that it's labeled like AAA, maybe
Yeah.
in this case can be priorities. Maybe it's more priority in this case than the change of the color.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So in the example that I said, it's a very good example. Actually, here the level AAA measure is about a link purpose that's not clear with just the link content, but there's another measure that's level AA, and that's about the link needing to make sense with the context surrounding. So in a case of a link that would be like click here, this would break an AA level criteria. But it's a really good point because this is some kind of simplification, right? Because eventually, if let's say you have, I don't know, on the FAQ page, some interactive element that's not keyboard accessible, or if you have something that, I don't know, that's level AAA, but that prevents people to log in, well, this is going to be more important because this is something that's more, giving more bad outcomes for the business. So it's just like you would do with bugs, right? Like you have some bugs that can be, I don't know, if you have a padding missing on the logo, this might not sound like a huge priority, but it can actually give a bad image of the company, and it's going to go higher on the priority list. So for accessibility issues, it's the same. The WCAG level is something that really needs to be taken into account, but eventually the business logic might take more importance than that. I agree with that. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your talk. I think it's very important to speak about these topics. Wanted to ask you if there is currently any framework or just any initiative regarding the web applications that are embedded into native applications or into, for example, the TV with an application that is for like Netflix, but that it's built as a web application.
Yeah.
Does it also apply? Is there any initiative that is also looking to fix that kind of things? Because I don't know if...
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So actually, WCAG is something that's related to the web, but that's not only related to like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You have some guidelines which are about e-publication, for example, or about accessibility of PDFs or stuff like that. So within WCAG, you can find some criteria that will be usable in other contexts, and then there are also some other type of standards that are more specific in a certain context. I think for mobile there is some mobile accessibility initiative from the W3C, so you might find that on the website. And yeah.
Hi. So,
Okay.
well, first of all, thank you for the talk. It's been really interesting. I wanted to ask you if there is like a really big difference between the screen readers, because I saw that JAWS is like the most used,
Yeah.
but in VoiceOver from macOS, I work as a front end, so I have a Mac, and that's the one that I'm using. So is there any big difference? Which one are most trustable? In which cases, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good question too. They're really different. Like I think, I did this comparison with like web browsers, and I think right now browser compatibility is much better now than what it was like 10 years ago, right? I think we can agree on that. And for screen readers, I think that we kind of in between. Like they do work almost the same, but there is notable difference. And for example, working at Shopify, we receive bug reports from people using screen readers, and we notice some bugs that arise on only one screen reader, and we cannot reproduce it on other. So which one is the more reliable? I'm not sure. I think one thing with JAWS is that JAWS is a Windows screen reader, and it's often used in professional words, so it tends to be used in operating systems that are also older. So from my experience, it tends to have it can have a behavior that's a bit different because people might be using an outdated version of the screen reader on outdated version of their browser, and so they're more likely to have issues. But ideally, you would do tests for several of them, yeah, you have no, if you really want to have it right for all, you need to test for all. One is not going to be reliable enough. And I think a last question, and then it's over.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. So we were asking about in which part of the process do you start to implement all of this testing?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think we have like -2 seconds left, so I'm just going to answer very quick, but ideally as early as possible. But you see with the requirements that you have, I think that designers having knowledge of accessibility is one of the things that help the most. But sometimes it's just about implementation. Like if you're doing, I don't know, whatever complex widget, you might want to look at it only at the development moment. That's it. We're over time. Thanks everybody for attending.